that whole process is something that you have to understand, because as we said in the beginning, since it's essentially invisible when you get it at the end, you've got to be able to follow the process to confirm what you've done along the way. So, when material comes off the cyclotrons, there's different types of scanning equipment that allows us to understand what energies are there, what isotopes we're producing. And then we go through chemistry to purify it and make sure we're delivering what our customers or what our products need along the way.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we talk with industry leaders who are driving the future of manufacturing. Today, I'm speaking with Michael Krachon, president of Theragenics Interventional. Theragenics is a leading global manufacturer of highly specialized, innovative medical technology and devices that are used in procedures to fight cancer and other diseases. Now, this is a fast-growing organization that's dedicated to life-saving treatments. In fact, physicians in more than 40 countries use Theragenics products for their patients. I'm looking forward to speaking with Michael because he has over 2 decades of experience within the medical technology sector, driving growth and innovation, particularly in the area of cancer treatments. Michael, welcome, and thank you for joining the show.
Kerrie, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. Really excited for the conversation.
Well, let's get right to it then. So first of all, would love to get to know you. If you could share a bit about your background and what led you to your current role in medical device manufacturing and as the president of Theragenics Interventional.
It's been an interesting ride to get here. I came out of school as a biomedical engineer and never really practiced the engineering side. Spent a little bit of time in quality in several different medical device industries from the beginning. And then around 2000, I got involved with a company called Bard Urological. Bard Urological was working with a treatment for prostate cancer called brachytherapy or seed implants. And I joined them as a product manager, but really a business manager as to how we would launch and grow that business globally. So I started to work with our international partners and our manufacturing partners to understand every aspect of the business and figure out how we build that. So that business started with a lot of radioisotope manipulation, creating products and turning it into what the customers ultimately needed. Working from the marketing and the sales side, I was able to interact a lot with the manufacturing facility to create the right products to help our customers do that. I was there for about 15 years. We grew the business, and I had an opportunity to run a sales and marketing department at one of the other competitors. So I got to see a second manufacturing facility along the way, spent a lot of time working with finance and operations to figure out how do we provide the product that we need at the cost that we need to have it to support our customers. I spent 5 years at that second facility, learning a second way to do the radioisotope manufacturing and production. And then I met an old friend from Theragenics who said, we're looking for some help as to how we move this business into the next phase. So I made the final jump to Theragenics, where after spending a little time waiting out a non-compete, I was able to jump into this role as the president of the business and work closely with not only the manufacturing facility here, but the commercial side to continue create products and evolve the business to leverage some of our resources and technologies to help this, as Kerrie said, this fast-growing cancer treatment industry. And it's really been an interesting and a fast-moving last 3 years as we've tried to get our feet underneath us and really look to the future to see what comes next.
So I understand that Theragenics has a couple different subsidiaries. Could you kind of talk through what, at a high level, what each of them do? I think that'd be helpful.
So Theragenics in the mid-2000s acquired, and over the last 10 years has acquired a couple of different companies, including Needletech, which is essentially a OEM needle manufacturing facility, and Galt Medical, which supports the interventional radiology community with a series of different products that we sell through distributors. And then in about I don't remember the exact year, 2015, 2018, it was before I got here, We acquired a company called Needletech, or not Needletech, Aerotech, which provides engineering services. So those parts of the business kind of run separately from the brachytherapy or the radioisotope part of the business that I work with, and allow us to have just a little bit of diversity as to how we support our customers and how we build our business and grow it.
That's interesting. There has been so much growth, which is excellent. Congratulations. Technology, I mean, has just changed so much, right, over the past few years. And I can imagine, especially so within the medical device manufacturing space. Since you started in the industry, what have been some of the sort of largest operational shifts that you've noticed?
I think the key thing is, what we've seen with automation and how do we do those things better. I think Breaky and what we do with seeds are a uniquely challenging product in that they are, essentially the size of a grain of rice. So we're building very small products that are implantable with radiation captured inside. So there's a lot of really challenging manufacturing work that technicians have to do. And the more pieces that we can automate, semi-automate, bring tools in to make better as being a big piece of that. And then, the other difference is just the computing support power that makes these tools and these ancillary test devices and other things work. We get more data about the manufacturing process than ever. And it's, really up to us to figure out how do we use that data, incorporate it into our practices, and essentially make the process better. So that's been good, and that's not even starting to look at the innovations as to how we look to create better products for the future, which there are a number of tools that help us get better at that as well.
And automation, certainly, the compute capacity to support such automation. I can imagine there's so much data that's being created. And then, yeah, just the unique challenge of producing radioisotope-based medical devices. Could you talk more about those kinds of challenges? And then, as you're speaking about innovation, right? Because you need innovation to solve those challenges. What is your process? How do you manage that?
That's a lot, and I'll kind of take that in a couple of different pieces. I think the last several years have really been an interesting transformation. When COVID happened, has impacted a lot of people. We had a very established organization with a very established workforce, and that kind of created a level of turnover we hadn't seen in a lot of our existence. So, we had to essentially reinvent a lot of the manufacturing process as a result of that, because instead of having employees who were with us when we built the facility, they moved on, retired, enjoying themselves one way or another, didn't want to come into the office. So now we've had to kind of learn how to do it all over again. And building that ownership and history is harder today, I think, than ever from an employee. The Amazons of the world, and, we're in an office park where people have choices, and, we're trying to find ways to have them, take pride in what we do. I think, working with a company that cures cancer and provides product that cures cancer is a way to help do that. But, the manufacturing process itself is challenging because there are really three distinct aspects of it. One, we have to make the radioisotope itself. So, we start with, inert material, and we run it through our cyclotrons to create a radioactive material. Radioactive materials are unique in that they're like a food item in that they're perishable. So when we make it, we only have a certain amount of time to manufacture it, get it to a patient, and have the patient or the clinician leverage that product for the treatment effect that they need it to be a part of. So, we've got to coordinate all those aspects. We have another unique challenge in that radiation is invisible. You don't really know how much you have. You don't know what it looks like. You're essentially, when we make it and we bring it off the cyclotron, we put it in the solution, and then we have to understand how much it is and track how much it is through the entire manufacturing process. So, we've got to be very precise about, tracking and materials and how that works. And when all these products are inside something that's essentially the size of a grain of rice that will ultimately be implanted in a patient, and these grains of rice can't be easily labeled, it becomes, rife with, potential challenges. So we have to have very strict quality controls. We have to have line clearances. So when we go from one order to the next, we do the right preparations and work with that to ensure that the right patient gets the right product. So once the isotope is made, we then put it into the seeds. The seeds are all different strengths. And then once the seeds are made, we put them into custom configurations for each patient. So each patient gets a very customized product that is, just for their cancer, just for their strength of activity and where it needs to go. And then the doctors work through to make sure they deliver it the right way. So, every aspect of that is challenging, especially when you're dealing with things that are so tiny along the way.
I thought we could all relate when you started to say it's like food because it's perishable, but then you said it's invisible, extremely small, and highly specialized. So, speaking of unique challenges.
And when radiation is used or too much of it is delivered, it can be, a safety issue as well, right?
Yeah.
So say it all the time, a little radiation is good, right? You go out, you sit in the sun, the vitamin D and the other things from a little radiation is healthy. Too much radiation has been a concern going back years in this country. And it's one of the challenges we face with both employees and with our product development, right? Employees are nervous about coming into a facility where radiation is delivered. It's not something, we spend a lot of time advertising in different places. So we, as part of the interview and training process, we do a lot of radiation safety information to get them comfortable. We follow OSHA guidelines about radiation, and those radiation levels are very well contained. So we have to be very careful about how it works. But during the course of the year, we have to monitor our employees as well to make sure that they're not going in places or getting excessive dose in places. So, there's a whole level of, essentially protections that we put on that other companies don't have to work with, right? Since, if you're working too much in one area of the building, you may have to stop working in that area in, the end of the year because you've reached or you're starting to approach what we consider a safe limit, which is significantly below what the OSHA limits are. So we have to have a technician team that's trained and able to, kind of be aware of that and work different positions in case they need to.
This is interesting. Okay, so on our show, we do like to explore the role of technology in manufacturing. So I wanted to ask you, does technology play a role in monitoring the radiation, protecting, ensuring safety for your employees?
So we've got several levels of technology that supports it. We've got sensors in different places that allow us to understand where the radiation is. We are constantly using some of it's even old technology like Geiger counters, basically just, making sure the right radiation is in the right place. Employees wear badges that monitor the technology or the radiation that they receive daily. So they come into the building, they put the badges on, we monitor that, we chart that, we, assess, who's getting too much. We've got safety committees that then look at it and, make decisions about where people can work and where they can't, through the course of the year. And, especially where we're working with the cyclotrons that are creating the radiation, they use large amounts of electricity and create secondary radiation in those areas. So you really can't go back and work in those areas until, you understand where that is and what the levels are in the monitoring. And there's a lot of safety built in, a lot of concrete built into different places to protect everybody involved. And, the good news is we've had no radiation safety issues over the last 40 plus years. So we know what we're doing, and we just have to be vigilant about it every single day.
Incredible. Well, can I ask you, in such a regulated environment, I'm curious how then you encourage and balance innovation. Because with innovation, of course, just inherently, there's some level of risk. You're doing something new and different. You're also solving challenges. How do you balance innovation with regulation in this environment?
Well, you have to do it methodically and thoughtfully. So you have to be understanding of the regulatory processes. You have to understand the procedures and different things that go in. And, we are we're working on some of that right now. One of the emerging areas of this field is the use of not only the brachytherapy seeds, but the use of radioisotope for other types of cancer delivery. So there is an emerging field which is using radioisotopes to treat very localized and very targeted cancers, as well as to do a lot of imaging agents and things like that. So we are having to refine what our isotope manufacturing is. We've got to be very careful about how we evolve the procedures. And all of that then becomes part of when we go to the approval process with the FDA, what's considered a design master file. So we then have to, document, understand, trace, just be very careful with what that whole process is as to how to make sure that new isotope that we're making is, what we said it is, and that it's done safely and otherwise. So not only do we have the people who work the cyclotrons, we've got a whole group of chemists who are working to, figure out how do we take the new material and change it. It's like the old alchemist, which is, changing lead into gold. We can almost do things like that. Energetically, it's not efficient, so we don't try to do that otherwise. But that whole process is something that you have to understand, because as we said at the beginning, since it's essentially invisible when you get it at the end, you've got to be able to follow the process to confirm what you've done along the way. So, when material comes off the cyclotrons, there's different types of scanning equipment that allows us to understand what energies are there, what isotopes we're producing. And then we go through chemistry to purify it and make sure we're delivering what, our customers or what our products need along the way.
Thank you for explaining that. And I was just thinking, maybe not everybody listening in would know what a cyclotron is. And it seems like a very critical part of your manufacturing process. Can you explain or describe a cyclotron?
Sure. So cyclotrons are very expensive capital equipment that are used to essentially accelerate atoms onto a target. And when the atoms hit the target, they create a different isotope. So they're adding all the energy with that, which makes that material radioactive. They are usually done in what they call vaults, which are large concrete structures that protect the environment around it and the employees from getting that energy. Often these machines run for anywhere from 12 hours to 2 weeks to create as much energy as you can, depending upon what that is. And then once you create the target, you have to take the target out of the cyclotron to essentially a hot cell so you can process it for use. So, it is a very specific, very challenging mechanism to be able to, carefully and appropriately collect the target, transport it to a different area, do the chemistry we need to turn it into a useful medical device and a useful medical product. These cyclotrons are also interesting because they don't really have any moving parts. They are generating they use a lot of electricity. They generate these streams of essentially atoms or photons that will, activate the energy, and then they will take the target out and process it. So they can last a really long time and still be productive. In fact, some of the first cyclotrons that were manufactured are still in existence today. And what's unique about Theragenics is we've sited for 14 of these on site, which is one of the largest, we call them cyclotron farms in the country, which allow us to have a rather unique opportunity to provide these different isotopes and support our own manufacturing needs.
Thank you for explaining that. Gosh, that's so interesting. I have to say, I just love doing this because I learned so much. Thank you.
It's fun from my standpoint because I actually use some of the engineering and the physics that I learned in school, and I can pretend to understand what we're doing. Oh, no, we've got a great team, and if I've made any mistakes in the specific details, they're mine, and they're not the team's. That's what they're doing. They really know what they're doing, and many of them have been doing this for 20 plus years to control how we manufacture this product for these isotopes that become products.
Having a great team behind you is so critical. That's great. Speaking of moving things, I was going to ask you about the supply chain. So I can imagine there's some unique challenges in regards to the supply chain. How do you manage, the quality and compliance as you look to the supply chain and you run the supply chain and any disruption? How do you manage that? I bet maintaining quality and compliance is always top of mind, but uniquely challenging when it comes to the supply chain.
It is, and there's two pieces of that, and the first one is just getting the timing of the supply chain right. We've got as I said at the beginning, we've got a perishable product that when we make it, we've got a limited half life. So if we make too much or too little at any point in time, we're either wasting or we're putting customers in a position where they have to make adjustments. And we've got a customer base that is irregular. It's when patients are diagnosed and when the clinics work. So we've got a lot of variation from an ordering process. So we've got 40 years of history that we're starting to tap into. And it's one of the things, as we talk later about what we can use better, is and start bringing AI into figuring out how do we do the planning with that. But once we get product in, we have to work closely with our vendors. We often, because we manufacture the isotope ourselves, we sometimes have an advantage over some of the other companies who are getting it from reactors. So we can manufacture it. We can take it off the machine if we get a little bit, either ahead or behind. But the other components with the product are, they're secondary and they're small. It's little shells, it's packaging, it's materials like that. And, we have to be very careful to maintain that inventory, understand what the pieces are, and have very good relationships with our vendors because things are so small. And because while we've made over 21 million seeds in our existence, don't always run big batches. So we've got to be able to have that personal relationship with our vendors to get what we need when we need it. And, we're doing with little titanium stuff. We use charcoal or things like that to absorb the radiation onto it. So it's very specialized little components and they don't typically keep them on the shelves. So we work very hard with our partners to do as best as we can with inventory management, but it's never as easy as we would like it to be, and we certainly have to continue to evolve how our planning works to make sure we get the right stuff at the right time.
Sounds like timing is of the essence, really critical in your supply chain. Do you have any technologies that you're using to manage supply chain or inventory management?
Well, we use an inventory management system within that.
Okay.
Because a lot of our products are small, we can't use tagging or things like that to kind of,
Right.
right? You can't easily put RFID tags on things that are, an eighth of a millimeter wide, which is what the end of the caps are. That really makes it difficult. So, we do a lot of, it's not manual counting, but it's entering the system, it's tracking it, it's knowing the different lot sizes as to what that is. And then we've got a very dedicated team of, procurement specialists who track that and understand it. We've got to go back and reinvest in kind of the audit side of it to make sure we're getting product at the right time and understanding where it is. Because when you lose the 21 million seeds we've made probably would all fit in almost a cigar box, right? So when your entire production over 40 years is something that small, the components are that small, it takes some doing to keep track of them all and to make sure that you are, even when you're moving them from place to place in the facility, you're keeping track of that. So we've got, tracking things as they go from back and forth. We use a lot of binning that do have different types of identification on so we can follow it. And then when we're doing the manufacturing for after we made the seeds, we do patient by patient, essentially cartons. So we don't mix one patient's procedure and components with another patient. So, that supply chain, follows right through the entire manufacturing process to make sure that we're getting what we need, when we need to, who needs it.
Interesting. Interesting. I guess I just have to wrap my head around just how small these devices really are. But of course. Well, can I ask you about the future? So when you are looking out into the future of technology, manufacturing technologies, supply chain technologies, inventory, whatever you might need, even those that might impact patient outcomes, What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? And perhaps maybe also when it comes to the future, what might you have reservations about?
I think they go together. You look forward to it and you're scared of it at the same time. When you're dealing with radiation, you always have a little apprehension with anything changing because, again, when we make the seeds, we're doing welds that are essentially half the width of a hair as we put these pieces together. So any changes are challenging, but there's a couple of things that I am looking forward to on the planning side. And the other side, I think the use of AI to build our databases and leverage the information we have, I think will help us become more efficient on the manufacturing process. We are starting to dabble in it, like I think a lot of people are, and trying to understand how to best use it. It is not something that a manufacturing floor necessarily is comfortable with because it's not something they've done in the past. And wrapping your arms around something that is supposed to be a tool to help you instead of make your life difficult is something that we're going to have to work through. But I think it's got amazing opportunities to do that, especially when it comes to efficiencies and how we make our radiation and how we leverage its use. I think targeted robotics and automation are the other part of it, right? We talked a little bit at the beginning of the importance of employee safety and how do we make sure doses. Well, we want to make sure dose to fingers, dose to extremities are entirely controlled. And, while a lot of these products have, if you're a foot and a half away and the dose is very low, to do some of these things, you have to get close to it. So the more components that we can automate, I think that's going to be a little bit easier. And we've got some programs in place that are looking at it. But at the same time, automating whole systems are challenging. So we're really trying to do it in different phases of the manufacturing process to make it more efficient within that and to speed the production time along the way. And then the last thing that we're starting to do is, especially on, the product development and evolution side, is use a lot more 3D printing. We do a lot of, even our molding and other things are done in smaller quantities. So we're starting to look for ways to 3D print, either the molds or the piece above it or the other component, so we can create very specialized, customized products, but without having to, do the full investment in the old-fashioned molds or the bigger ones. And that allows us to keep our costs down and to keep innovating a little bit more as to what our offering can be. So, there's a lot out there. I think by watching the medical device industry is interesting because we get excited about new technologies, but we might be a little bit slower to adopt them. I think we pay attention to our doctors a little bit who go through clinical study after clinical study and are pretty conservative when adopting new technologies. And a lot of med devices the same way, especially those of us in a little bit smaller organizations, because we can't afford to make a mistake. When every product we make ultimately ends up in a patient, we need to make sure that the quality and the controls of it is what ends up in the patient is exactly what we intended to. So, changes in the process happen slow. There's a lot of quality and testing and validation that goes into those pieces. And, that enables us to feel confident of what we're delivering to our clinicians and ultimately to our patients is exactly what they need. And oftentimes in a very trying point in their life, no, it's one thing if, some other medical device products aren't perfect, but when you're treating a cancer and you're implanting it, you can't take it back. You can't change it once you put it in there. So we got to get it right the first time.
I see. I mean, there's a lot of risk here, and you want to get it right. It has to be of highest quality. So I could definitely see that, you want to make sure you validate quality is assured, but at the same time looking to the future. And it sounds like with AI, more automation, the new development techniques, 3D printing, there's a lot of opportunity to really cut costs, maybe become more efficient and create new opportunity. So that's great.
Absolutely. And that's what we're most excited about. I think, we've reached a point in the last couple of years where we're making more of these reinvestments for the next 40 years. So how do we prepare ourselves for what's next? How do we get comfortable being uncomfortable looking at some of these different things, and how do we continue to work with our customers to get them the products and the things that they need that oftentimes they can't get anyplace else.
Well, okay, my next question for you is about advice. So, as a leader of such a cutting edge medical technology organization, as a manufacturer of highly regulated yet innovative technology, what advice would you give to other manufacturing leaders, maybe looking to take their business to the next level, or those looking to maybe grow their career? What advice would you have?
A couple things. I think, and I'll go back to kind of my time on the product management side and working with clinicians in ORs and looking at product development and manufacturing process development. In my mind, is a lot the same way. The more experience you can get from things that are different from what you're doing, the more relationships you can invest in, the more things you can see, even if they don't seem related, allow you to kind of visualize different solutions. So, I'm a big believer in taking the time to pay attention to what's happening around you. Look for people who are good at what they do. When I was at Bard, and I'll admit I was not directly involved in all of it, but I knew enough of their operations team that it was excellent, right? We had facilities around the world, and they were really good at bringing the cost out of a manufacturing process. So when things get difficult here, you go back to that network of people. And even if they're making something like Foley catheters or something that's completely unrelated, if you pay attention enough to the process and you're thinking a little bit creatively about how that can apply, there are kernels of things that you can bring back home. And I just, remember watching hundreds of medical procedures and watching what doctors do and thinking, well, why do you do it that way? And as you understand that, you can apply those same things to a medical device manufacturing process. Well, why do you do it that way? And how can we do it better? And then the last thing I will say about that is, trust and engage with the technicians who are doing it, right? Understand where their challenges are, where their opportunities are, and make the investments around where the problems are today instead of, looking at something and having a great solution that may or may not be your quickest way to make something better along the way. So, if you put a good team together and you encourage them to be open and sharing about what their challenges are, we can work together to give them better solutions and make their lives a little bit better and make our patients' lives a little bit better in the long run.
Can I ask you any final thoughts? Was there anything that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to share?
I'm sure there's a lot, but no, I think we've covered a lot. I think it's for me, this is has been an interesting thought process about how to look at ourselves and how we compare to other things and work with the team to understand what we're doing. I think and reflect on things that might seem simple to us are really a little bit more complicated maybe than that we realize they are. I think, when you say it's perishable, it's small, and it's invisible, we take that for granted. But apparently, from a manufacturing process, that's something a little challenging to work with at times. So it's exciting for us to keep trying to make that a little bit better. And as I said, try and be able to translate that to the clinical practices and the clinicians we work with. So, we're committed to the next 40 years and leveraging the capabilities we have and finding new markets for it. So appreciate you listening to us a little bit, and hopefully it was an interesting perspective of things.
Absolutely. Not every day am I talking about radioisotopes or cyclotrons. So this has been wonderful. Can I ask you, for anybody who is interested in learning more about you or Theragenics, where would you send them?
So I do things. One, a little bit about Theragenics is on our website, www.theragenics.com, or our LinkedIn pages. We're certainly found there. From the products we use and we create, we've got a website called Life with Seeds. It talks a little bit about the seed implant procedure and what men go through with prostate cancer, mostly as to how that works. And those are the core places. I'm on LinkedIn. If people want to learn a little bit more about me, please reach out, message me, and I'm happy to talk about what we're doing and what we have done, and look for ways or things we can do things differently and additionally in the future. So hopefully that's it. I'm not good at other social media things as much as I like to be. And that's one of my goals for this year is to become a little more connected with it. So anything I can do, love to talk to people and learn how we can do things better.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely include the links in the show notes for everyone. But Michael, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Kerrie.
All right. That was Michael Krachon, president at Theragenics Interventional. And to everyone listening, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.